I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Chara.
I was raised to hate the Russians. My father taught me they were enemies, dangerous, forbidden. So why, 3 years after that night in Monaco, did I still remember the look in Maxim Volkov's eyes? I was engaged to another man, an ally of my family, a marriage that was supposed to protect our name. But when Maxim walked into the party, everything inside me disobeyed. I knew that wanting him could destroy my family. But marrying the wrong man could destroy me. I had to choose. Give in to the forbidden desire that could set 2 families ablaze, or marry the man everyone had chosen for me, even if it destroyed me from the inside. Hi, I'm Lena. A special shout-out to those of you watching Book 1 for free here on the My Stories platform, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Chapter 1. The dress squeezed tighter than the family. The corset bit into my ribs as if it knew what I didn't want to admit. "Breathe, princess," Bianca said from the studio couch, a glass of cheap wine in her hand, and a smile only she could hold up in an engagement fitting. Or don't. An arranged marriage is the most efficient birth control of the century. It suffocates the woman before she even has any desire. The seamstress adjusted another stitch of the burgundy at my back, and I held my breath. Manhattan burned outside the window, a late afternoon sun slicing the Fifth Avenue skyscrapers into amber-colored slivers. The dress wasn't mine. The body wasn't mine. Neither were the shoes Bianca had picked out, because I couldn't even decide between 2 pairs of heels without asking someone to tell me which option would cause the least trouble. "It looks beautiful, Miss Bellavita," the seamstress murmured, smoothing the fabric over my hip with experienced, discreet fingers, like someone wrapping a gift no one had asked whether it wanted to be given. I didn't look in the mirror. I already knew what I'd see. The princess of the Italian mafia. The perfect daughter. The future Mrs. Ferretti if my father kept ripping promises out of my chest the way you rip out a tooth without anesthesia. Burgundy was the family's color. The dress had the olive crest embroidered into the lining, hidden, where only I would ever know. Like everything with the Bellavitas, what mattered most stayed buried where no one could see. "You've gone white," Bianca said, quieter. "Chiara, look at me." I looked. "You can still run," she went on, no longer smiling. "Seriously, my dad's a lawyer. There's time to disappear with you before 9. "The event venue is mine if I marry," I answered, and my voice came out the size of a 10-year-old girl. "If I run, my father hands the business to someone else. The venue is yours because your mother left it to you. The venue is his because she died before signing it over." Bianca shut her mouth. Nobody had a comeback for that. Not even her. The silence settled between us like something with weight, and the seamstress made a point of looking like she hadn't heard a thing. The seamstress finished the last stitch and stepped back 2 paces, tilting her head as she assessed the result. Outside, the armored car was already parked at the curb, and I could see the back of the driver's head through the tinted glass. Salvatore Bellavita didn't send a car without a reason. He sent a car to deliver his daughter to her own noose, and still expected her to thank him for the ride. I came down the studio stairs with Bianca holding up the hem of the dress so the fabric wouldn't drag along the worn marble of the hallway. She kissed my cheek before settling me into the back seat, her cold lips against my heated temple. "If he makes you smile even once," she said, still holding the door, "I'll burn the cheap wine." I shut the door. The driver pulled off. My father was beside me before I noticed. He always was. The signet ring gleamed low when he rested his hand on the seat back, and the smell of old cigarettes came with it, mixed with the Piedmont wine he never let go uncorked. "You look beautiful," Salvatore said. He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at the window. "Thank you, Papa. Rocco will like it." I closed my eyes. The name ached at the back of my teeth. "Papa." "Don't start," he cut in, still watching the traffic. You have everything a woman of our family can have, Kiara. Everything. Your mother's house goes into your name tomorrow morning, if tonight goes as agreed. One yes at the altar within 3 weeks, and for the rest of my time on this earth you run whatever you want. Wedding, dowry, house, contract. Rocco signed. Rocco also signed the contract to take over our New Jersey route if I die in childbirth. He finally turned his face toward me. He didn't fake surprise, which hurt more than if he had. You read the contract. I read every contract that crosses your office since I was 18, Papa. Then you know it's standard in every family. It's standard in families that bury their daughters. He turned his eyes back to the window. The Long Island Bridge started passing on the other side of the tinted glass, the Manhattan skyline shrinking behind us, each skyscraper getting smaller until it vanished. Long Island waited on the other side of the East River with the Bella Vita mansion, 600 guests, and the man my father had chosen to carry my last name for the next 40 years. You'll get the event venue, Salvatore repeated, quieter, as if the sentence became truer said that way, almost in secret. It's what your mother wanted. My mother wanted me to choose. Your mother died before she learned how the world works. I didn't answer. There was no answer that wouldn't cost something I still needed for the night. The mansion appeared at the end of the private drive, lit up like an ocean liner run aground on the grass. A line of black cars, guards in the yard wearing suits that hid nothing. White lights covering every inch of the stone veranda. The outside air hit cold when the driver opened my door. An early autumn cold, the kind that catches you off guard because it still feels like summer during the day. I got out without feeling my feet. I climbed the marble staircase, the burgundy weighing on every step. Rocco Ferretti waited for me at the top, a perfect black suit, a smile sized exactly for the official photos, not a millimeter more. Kiara. He took my hand and kissed my knuckles. His mouth was too warm, as if he'd been drinking before receiving me, and the contact lasted a second longer than necessary. Rocco. You look stunning. Thank you. He held me by the elbow and steered me into the hall. His hand was firm where it didn't need to be firm, fingers finding bone with a familiarity he hadn't yet earned the right to have. The main hall swallowed me in a single gulp. Crystal chandeliers throwing light over tables draped in white linen, 600 faces I half knew. The toast already set up on a platform at the center with white flowers and a banner with our names in gold calligraphy. My father was already there, smiling the first genuine moment of the night. Don Alberto Marchesi, the consigliere, a 60-year-old man who had served my father longer than I'd been alive, stood beside him with the neutral face he kept in any situation, wedding, funeral, or gunshot. Rocco handed me a glass of Piedmont wine. I took a sip so I wouldn't have to answer anything. The wine went down like a bitter medicine, and I mentally counted the hours left until I could take that corset off in my own room, breathe deep for the first time all day, and pretend for a few hours that the night hadn't happened. To the future, Rocco said, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear, raising his glass with the pleasure of someone who already knew he'd won. To my future with the most beautiful woman in this room. I smiled. I raised my glass. I took another sip. That's when the main doors opened. It wasn't supposed to be an opening. It wasn't in the night's script. All the guests had come in an hour earlier. The string quartet was already playing the second movement of the program, and the guards at the entrance were positioned to close up, not to receive anyone. But I noticed, without looking directly, that 3 of them moved toward the door at the same time, and then stopped moving as if someone had given a silent order that didn't need to be said out loud. I raised my eyes. The man who came in stood 6'2" in a black suit with no tie, the collar of his white shirt open at the first button with the ease of someone who needed no detail at all to fill an entire room, dark hair cut short, shoulders that made the cut of the suit an exercise in serious tailoring. The skin of his left forearm showed beneath his watch, and I didn't need a better look to know what was tattooed there. Orthodox cross. Volkov. My fingers loosened on the glass. The wine sloshed. A little slid over the crystal rim and fell to the marble floor, a small burgundy stain on the white. and I had to grip the stem of the glass with the 2 fingers that still worked to keep from dropping the whole thing at once. Maxim Volkov didn't look at anyone in the hall. He looked at me. 3 years. 3 years since Monaco. 3 years since those 3 seconds on the balcony of a casino I swore not to remember. 3 years in which I had convinced half my chest that that look had never happened, that it was just the Mediterranean summer heat and the champagne and the lack of sleep. His eyes were the same closed gray, the kind that reveals nothing, and therefore reveals everything. His mouth was the same thin mouth that didn't smile. And the 3 seconds all came back at once, with interest, inside my sternum. No one in the hall was breathing right. The cellist lost the beat for half a second before recovering. That man wasn't supposed to be there. The Volkov clan and the Bellavita family hadn't exchanged anything in decades, except veiled threats at third parties' dinners. And yet he had walked through the main door like someone stepping into his own dining room on any given Tuesday. "Chiara," Rocco said beside me, quietly, with a calm that was worse than shouting. "You're pale." "I'm fine. Do you know that man?" The question was so controlled that I nearly stumbled over it. Rocco wasn't asking out of curiosity. He was asking in the same tone he used when he found a badly closed invoice in one of my father's books, the tone of someone who already knows the answer and is waiting to see the size of the lie. My father advanced across the hall with Don Alberto half a step behind. I couldn't hear what he was saying from there, but I could see the line of his jaw harden with every yard gained. Salvatore stopped 3 meters from Maxim, and they exchanged a short sentence. 1. My father pointed to the exit without taking his eyes off the Russian's face. Maxim tilted his head slowly, almost politely, and said 1 more sentence. My father turned his face and looked for me in the hall. He found me. I held his gaze because I no longer knew what else to do. Rocco still had his hand on my elbow, and I felt every one of his fingers like heated iron, a pressure that didn't ask permission and didn't wait for anyone to ask. "You do know him," Rocco repeated, now even quieter, and his hand tightened. I didn't answer. Across the hall, Maxim slowly turned his head and looked at Rocco's hand on my elbow. Just that. He looked. 3 exact seconds, and I felt without seeing it, my fiancé's hand relax by 0.5 millimeter, before tightening again, as if he'd been reminded, by a stranger who wasn't supposed to be there, that somewhere in that hall, someone was paying attention to him. The string quartet kept playing. No one in the hall knew the night was already over. Chapter 2. 3 seconds in Monaco. I needed air before the corset killed me before Rocco did. "Excuse me," I murmured, and I pulled free of his hand with the delicacy that manners required and the urgency my lungs required. "1 moment. Just 1 moment." Rocco nearly said something. I didn't let him. I crossed the hall with the empty glass in my hand, greeting 3 matriarchs with the same rehearsed smile I'd used for years for those occasions, and slipped out through the French doors at the back before anyone could grab me by the arm. The mansion's terrace breathed the cold Long Island night. Wet grass down below, white lights strung in the trees like jewels no one would wear, and the smell of the sea coming from the other side of the property in slow waves that mixed salt and damp leaf. I set the glass on the marble railing and closed my eyes. The stone was ice cold under my fingers. The cold climbed up my wrist, up my arm, and for a second I just focused on that, the cold, because it was the only honest thing about the whole night. The string quartet came muffled through the closed doors, a waltz someone had chosen to sound like celebration, and which, from outside, sounded only like noise. I breathed deep. The air tasted of winter and wet grass, and of freedom that lasted no more than 5 minutes. That's when I felt the presence. I didn't hear it. I felt it. "You almost dropped the glass." The voice came from my left, low, with a slight accent that hid nothing and didn't try to. I opened my eyes. Maxim Volkov stood 2 meters from me, leaning against the railing with the calm of someone who had gotten there before I did, as if the terrace were his, and he'd granted me entry. His tie loosened 2 millimeters. The glass of whiskey in his right hand, no rush at all. I don't know how he'd crossed the hall without my noticing. No one within my perimeter went unnoticed. It was training. It was reflex. It was the first thing my father taught me before any social protocol. And yet there he was, as if the protocol didn't apply to him. "What are you doing at my party?" I asked. "Saving your life, probably." "My life doesn't need saving." "Your life has 2 weeks." I turned my face to look at him. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't posing. Wasn't wearing that calculated expression men of power put on when they want to seem generous while delivering bad news. He was looking at me with the same closed gray of Monaco. And I hated that my memory had kept the exact shade of those eyes for 3 whole years, with a fidelity I'd never asked for. "You invade my father's house," I answered, with the venom my family had taught me to serve on ice. "Interrupt my engagement. Talk about my life like it's pocket information. And you expect me to listen?" "I expect you to recognize what you already know." "I don't know anything about you." "You do." He set the glass of whiskey on the marble railing, and the crystal made a dry sound against the stone. "You know Rocco Ferretti gripped your elbow with an owner's force. You know your father pretended not to see. You know the marriage contract cedes the New Jersey route to the groom in the event of your death, and you know Rocco reads contracts before people do. That's not pocket information. It's your week." My chest rose and fell once, against the corset, against my will. The sea sent a cold gust down the side of the terrace, and I didn't move, because moving would mean admitting that something in those words had reached where I didn't want to let it. "Every Russian lies," I answered, because that was the sentence my father had put in my mouth since I was 6, repeated at every dinner, every meeting, every time I asked why the family's map of the world had such rigid borders. "You came here to plant a doubt in the enemy's daughter. It's old. It's predictable." If it were predictable, I wouldn't have taken 3 years. The 3 seconds of Monaco fell between us, on the terrace, like a glass no one caught. He didn't move. Neither did I. The string quartet inside kept playing, the sound coming muffled through the closed French doors, and for a moment that was the only thing between us. That background music that didn't know it was witnessing something. The breeze brought more salt, more cold, and I couldn't tell whether the shiver that ran down the back of my neck was from the wind or from something else I refused to name. 2 weeks, Maxime repeated, quieter this time, as if letting the weight of the sentence come down on its own. "You have 2 weeks before the trap closes. Rocco will move up the wedding. We'll force a public collapse. We'll blame the Volkovs for a missing arms shipment. He'll use your name. He'll use mine. And your father, the one you call your father, will sign everything because he'll believe he has no choice." "Why are you telling me this?" He took his time. It wasn't a nervous hesitation. It was the pause of someone who had known the answer for a while and was deciding whether to give it whole or in half. The crystal of his glass reflected the white lights of the trees for an instant before he turned his face back to me. "Because I remember what I saw in Monaco." I gripped the marble railing with both hands. The cold climbed up my fingers, my wrists, my arms, and this time I let it, because I needed something concrete and solid to hold on to while the rest of the night spun. "You don't know me." "No." Half a second of silence, the kind that weighs. "But I didn't forget you." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The sea sent another smell of salt, and I picked up the empty glass from the railing, turned my back, and went back into the hall without looking behind me because, if I looked, I would stand there until my father appeared with 2 guards and an expression I didn't want to see that night. The hallway between the hall and the stairs was empty when I passed. It should have been empty. Rocco leaned against the doorframe and cut off my path before I reached the staircase, with the precision of someone who knew exactly how long I'd been gone. "Chiara." "Rocco, where did you go?" "To get air." "With whom?" He took a step. I raised my chin by reflex. His hand closed around my wrist, and he made a point of keeping the official photo smile while he squeezed, teeth on display, eyes completely cold behind the expression of a satisfied fiancé. My fiancé doesn't disappear with a Russian on the terrace on the day of her own engagement, Rocco said, calm, quiet, with the cadence of someone repeating an obvious rule to a child. It doesn't look good. Let go of my wrist. I'm holding it with affection, my love. The grip tightened. I felt the skin under the bracelet start to burn, the pressure of his fingers marking against bone, each finger with a distinct weight, as if he were making a point of my feeling each one separately. A couple crossed the far end of the hallway, and Rocco immediately tilted his face and kissed the top of my forehead, the perfect gesture for a 2-second audience, and then turned his face back to me with the same smiling mouth he used for the photos and for the people he needed to convince. "Never disappear again without telling me," he murmured, his mouth near my ear, the tone almost gentle. "Never. You're not a single woman anymore, Kiara. You're already mine." He let go of my wrist, slowly, as if he were doing me a favor, as if that act of letting go were proof of his generosity. He ran his hand over my shoulder, adjusted a strap of the dress that didn't need adjusting, and went back into the hall without waiting for an answer, without looking back, with the tranquil confidence of someone who can't imagine anyone would contradict him. I stood in the hallway. The music inside went on. Voices, laughter, the sound of glasses touching. 5 meters ahead, at the end of the wall, leaning against a column with his arms crossed, and the expression of someone who had watched everything without blinking, Maxim Volkov stood. I don't know for how long. He didn't come to me, didn't speak, made no gesture. He just looked at my wrist, where the red imprint of a finger was already starting to show against the skin, and then looked at the hallway Rocco had left through. 3 seconds. Then he left. I went up the service stairs with my hand closed around my wrist to hide the mark. I passed my father's private library, pushed the half-open door, and went in without turning on the light. I needed thick-walled silence for a minute before going up another flight. The hallway carpet muffled my steps, and every closed door seemed like a comment on the night I had just survived. I shut my bedroom door, rested my back against the wood for a moment, and breathed in the silence, the only real silence I had found in hours. Then I dropped into the vanity chair, still in the dress, still in the corset, my heels still on my feet because taking off the heels was a step that required more calm than I had at that moment. My phone flashed on the console. A message from Bianca. "Are you asleep already, or have you killed Rocco already?" I didn't answer. I got up to take off the dress, my fingers searching for the side zipper in the burgundy fabric. I ran my hand along the inner lining, the cold silk against my palm, and that's when my fingers found a folded piece of paper in the dress's inner pocket. It wasn't mine. No engagement dress had a pocket. My father's seamstress wouldn't have added a pocket without telling me, without documenting it, without billing the extra hour for the modification. I pulled out the paper carefully, as if opening it fast might undo it, with the growing certainty that no one had come close enough to put it there all night. No one. Except one. He had crossed the hall without my noticing. He had passed close enough on the terrace. He had left without waiting for a thank you. I opened the paper. There was no name, no warning, no signature, not a single word beyond the numbers. Just 10 digits, written in handwriting I didn't recognize, with a black ink that still looked damp at the fold of the paper, as if it had been written just before it was delivered. Outside my room, across the entire mansion, the string quartet kept playing for a party that was no longer mine. Inside, I held the paper with the same hand Rocco had squeezed 20 minutes earlier, and the burning at my wrist was still there, faint and persistent, like a question I still didn't know how to answer. 2 weeks, he had said. The note burned in the middle of my palm, as if it knew the answer I still hadn't admitted to myself. Chapter 3. A dinner that was a trap. The note's paper had been crumpled inside my pocket since the early hours of Saturday, and I didn't have the courage to type the 10 digits into my phone. I left the paper in the top drawer of the office, under a supplier's notepad, as if hiding it from myself solved anything. Monday, noon. The November light slanted in through the tall windows of the event venue in Chelsea, and the sweet smell of the test flowers already filled the hallway up to my office. That space was mine in daily life. Every corner chosen by me, every wall painted by me, every contract passing across my desk before my father's official signature. And yet, I didn't have the building's name on paper. The deed was in his safe, waiting for the wedding. Bianca came in without knocking, her black coat still wet from the autumn rain, a giant cup of coffee in one hand, and her bag dragging in the other. She dumped everything on my desk before dropping into the armchair. "Did you sleep? A little?" "Great lie. Keep trying." I pushed my own coffee toward her, because hers had already spilled half onto the lid. Bianca accepted without ceremony. "Chi, look at me." Her voice dropped half a tone, which in Bianca meant real seriousness. "Did the Russian send the note or not?" "I don't know." "You have 10 digits in your pocket and you don't know?" "They're not in my pocket. They're in the drawer." She raised an eyebrow, sipped her coffee, and pointed at my drawer with her chin. "I spent the whole weekend waiting for you to call me hysterical to say you'd memorized the number, and you stuck it in a drawer. Bye. If that number is Maxim Volkov's, dialing means I listen to him. And if it's not his? Worse." She laughed quietly, rested her head against the back of the chair, and looked at me for a second longer than usual. Bianca could read silence better than any lawyer. "You're very quiet today." "I'm working." "You've been staring at a blank spreadsheet since I got here." I looked at the screen, and she was right. I closed the laptop slowly. The curtain moved with the draft from the ceiling fan, and for an instant, the crumpled paper inside the drawer seemed to have a weight of its own. The desk phone rang before I could answer. Internal number from the mansion. Salvatore Bellavita, my father, never called from his own cell phone during the day. Always the internal line, always with the voice of Don Alberto Marchesi, the old consigliere of the house, on the other end. That call started with a message, not with a hello. "Miss Chiara, dinner tonight. Family restaurant, 8 o'clock. Attendance mandatory. Formal dress. Any occasion?" Mr. Ferretti requested it. I closed my eyes for a second. Bianca had already understood from my face and was standing up, gathering her coat again. "Tell my father I'll be there." I set down the phone. Bianca held out her coffee to me, and this time I took it. "Chi, if he shoves a contract at you tonight, will you sign?" "No." "Are you sure?" I looked at the drawer. The paper was still there, the ink by now completely dried. "Yes." The Bellavita's closed restaurant sat at the end of a narrow street in Little Italy, with a dark marble facade and a single door that only opened from the inside. It wasn't a restaurant. It was a stage. My father used that address when he wanted a decision made with a witness and no audience. The lights were low, the waiters were ours, and everyone who sat in those chairs knew what it meant. The driver stopped out front at 8:02. A fine drizzle was falling, the kind that sticks to your hair and pretends it isn't rain. I adjusted the black dress, long, no neckline, a dress that said obedience before I opened my mouth. My father liked that. Rocco Ferretti waited for me just past the entrance, as if my father's dining room were already his. He was impeccable, as always. Dark gray suit, hair combed back, that smile he saved only for an audience. Rocco was 30-something, 6'2", and had an impressive ability to look charming while breaking someone's wrist under the table. He offered me his arm. "You're 2 minutes late, my love. Traffic. I don't like to wait." I fit my hand into his arm because it was what was expected. The pressure of his fingers over my glove wasn't gentle, but no one passing on the sidewalk would notice. We went in together. The restaurant's main room was reserved. 10 people at the central table, all ours. My father at the head, Don Alberto to his right, the 2 oldest captains of the family, 2 of Rocco's trusted men, and 3 empty seats. 1 for me, 1 for Rocco, and 1 for someone who hadn't arrived yet. I kissed my father's cheek. He squeezed my hand for a second longer than necessary. "You're pale. Tired. Eat." He pushed the bread closer to my plate. "Rocco has an announcement." I sat. Rocco pulled his chair right up against mine, closer than any fiancé with respect would pull. His hand found my knee under the white cloth before the soup even arrived. It didn't squeeze. It just stayed there. A reminder. The announcement came between the second and third request for wine. Rocco raised his glass, smiled at the whole table, and said, in his usual smooth voice, "I've decided there's no reason to wait until spring. I'm moving up the wedding. 6 weeks." The silence at the table lasted half a second. My father didn't look at me. Don Alberto pretended it was old news. The captains toasted. Rocco's hand on my knee squeezed lightly. I felt the air leave me as if someone had opened a window at my back. 6 weeks, I repeated. "You won't complain about the dress," Rocco laughed, looking at the others. "We'll buy another one." I was about to answer. I don't know what would have come out, but it would have come out. Except the door to the room opened first. Maxim Volkov came in behind one of the house's waiters, his dark coat heavy with rain. Yuri Kozlov came half a step behind him, silent, his coat buttoned up to his neck, and his eyes already sweeping the room. Neither of them asked permission. My father rose half a centimeter from his chair. Don Alberto set down his napkin. "Volkov. Bella Vita." Maxim's voice came low, cutting through the room. "I came to discuss the New Jersey cargo. Your office said you were dining here. My office said wrong. My mistake, then. Since I'm here, I'll accept a glass." He didn't wait for permission. He pulled out the chair from the empty seat on the opposite side of the table, the only place from which he could see me straight on, and sat. Yuri stood behind him, his eyes wandering the room like a weather report no one had asked for. Rocco stiffened at my side. His hand left my knee and went to his glass. "I'll make a toast," he said, too loud. "To the bride." He raised his glass in my direction. I raised mine by reflex. My father raised his. The captains raised theirs. Maxim didn't raise his. "First," he said, with that calm that asked no permission, "I'd recommend changing the lady's glass." The room froze. Rocco laughed, without humor. "I beg your pardon?" "The lady's glass." Maxim pointed with his chin. "There's residue on the rim. It's not normal for this house's service." I passed the wine steward at the entrance. He seemed nervous. My father looked at my glass, looked at the wine steward standing in the corner. The wine steward looked at the floor. That was all it took. "Change it," said my father, without raising his voice. The waiter changed it. Rocco laughed again, this time with too much effort in his mouth. "You walk into my dinner uninvited, and you also want to rearrange the table, Volkov?" "Just the lady's glass." His eyes met mine for 3 seconds. 3. Always 3 with that man, as if he were counting. I drank from the new glass when it arrived. The wine was correct. The usual Piedmont, dry, dark. Rocco didn't toast again. My father steered the conversation to New Jersey, and Maxim answered in half sentences, a man who had already done what he'd come to do. In that instant, with Rocco's hand back on my knee and the taste of the new wine in my mouth, I understood 2 things at once. The first, someone had tried to poison me. Not to kill. To make me sick in public, doubled over in the bathroom, indisposed in front of both families. The perfect scenario for Rocco to announce moving up the wedding for health reasons, out of delicacy, out of protection. That dinner had been scripted, and I was the centerpiece meant to faint at the right moment. The second, the Russian across the table had dismantled the script with 1 sentence, without anyone, not even my father, fully understanding what he had just done. I understood. Rocco understood. That was enough. The dinner went on autopilot. Dessert, coffee. My father gave me a good night shorter than usual. Rocco insisted on walking me to the car. I declined with a polite sentence, and he, in front of the captains, couldn't insist without looking like what he was. I went out alone through the side door that led to the parking lot. The drizzle had picked up. My car was about 20 meters away, the driver already waiting. I passed through the shadow of a pillar, and Maxim Volkov was there. Leaning against the marble column, no coat, no rush, as if he'd known since the middle of dinner that I would come out that door at that time. Yuri waited off to the side, 2 steps behind him, his eyes on the entire parking lot, except the 2 of us. "Miss Bellavita, you followed me." I waited. "The difference is academic." He nearly smiled, nearly. "We need to be quick. I don't need anything. You've kept a file since you were 18. Movements from the engagement. Numbers that don't add up." The air came in cold through my mouth and didn't come back out. "How do you know that?" "Look for it." His voice dropped half a tone, and the distance between us shrank without either of us moving. "It's all there. Rocco has been stealing from your father for 2 years. He's building a frame against mine, and he'll move up the wedding because you, once married, can't testify against your husband. That's the law of another country. It's not about the law. It's about what the family will accept once the ring is on your finger." I wanted to say something. Sarcasm, an order, anything that could serve as a barrier. My mouth didn't obey. What came out was quieter than I wanted. "Why are you doing this?" He took his time to answer. The drizzle fell between us, his dark hair beginning to stick to his forehead. And for a second, the man in the suit turned into the man from Monaco again. The same one, 3 years older, without the glass in his hand this time. "Because you have 2 weeks. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give today." He took a step back. Yuri raised his chin as a signal. The engine of a dark car started at the back of the lot. "Look for the file, Miss Bellavita," Maxim said. "Before Saturday." He turned. He walked to the car without running. He got in. The taillights lit up red and pulled away in the rain. I stood there longer than I should have. The black dress heavy with moisture, the taste of coffee still in my mouth, and my hand closed so tight inside the glove that the seam at the knuckle ached. My driver honked once, discreetly. I walked to the car. I sat. I gave the address of the mansion, and then I corrected it. I gave the address of my apartment in Chelsea, the small one, the one no one in the family frequented. The driver didn't ask. He turned on the hazards and pulled off. On the way, I took the wet glove off my right hand and slipped my fingers into the inner pocket of my coat. Saturday's note was still there, the 10 digits, ink dry now, paper crumpled from being squeezed so much. I got to the apartment, locked the door, took off my shoes in the hallway, and went straight to the bedroom closet. At the back, behind the school notebooks I'd never thrown out, there was a brown leather folder I hadn't opened in 7 years. Strange movements from the engagement. Receipts I'd started keeping at 18 out of the instinct of a girl who had learned early to doubt things that were too good. I sat on the bedroom floor, still in the black dress dirty with rain, and opened the folder in my lap. The first page was a bank statement. The second, a copy of a supply contract with a company I didn't recognize. The third, an offshore address in Singapore. My chest rose and fell once. He was right. Chapter 4. The room where the door locked. I spent all of Tuesday inside that folder. I didn't go to the event venue. I didn't answer my father's phone. Bianca called 3 times. I answered the third with a short message saying I was alive and needed the day. She sent a knife emoji and a heart, which in Bianca meant, "I'm worried, but I'll give you space." By Wednesday morning, I already knew the essentials. Not enough to take to Salvatore Bellavita and survive the conversation, but enough to know the conversation existed. Contract numbers that appeared twice with different amounts. An offshore in Singapore, receiving monthly transfers signed by Rocco Ferretti as an intermediary. Registered outgoing cargo that didn't match the registered incoming cargo. None of it was courtroom proof. It was proof that I was right to doubt, and for now that was what I had. I needed more. I needed the originals kept in the archive room backstage at the event venue. the locked room where the building's administrative contracts sat alongside the client's commercial contracts. Rocco had had access to that room for a year, since my father had included him as co-manager of the engagement. No one had thought it strange at the time. I had. I got to Chelsea at 3 in the afternoon. The event venue was in the middle of a hallway of activity. Saturday's formal engagement had its last decoration adjustments, and the crews were coming and going nonstop. Perfect. A familiar face amid the bustle is an invisible face. I passed the office, greeted the coordinator, went up in the service elevator. The backstage hallway was behind the main hall, 3 storage doors, a security room, and at the very end, the archive room. Old lock, master key on my personal keyring since the venue was mine. I turned the key. I went in. I shut the door behind me without locking it. The room had the dry smell of paper no one had touched in far too long, folders stacked in steel cabinets that were already losing paint at the edges, an old table in the center, with a deep gouge in the wood I'd never been able to explain, a single bulb on the ceiling that hummed low as if always about to go out. I went straight to the cabinet Rocco used. It was shut with a new padlock, a heavy model no one on the venue's staff had put there. My employees asked me for authorization even to change a light bulb. I took a box cutter from my bag and forced the screw on the hinge. The padlock hung loose. The door opened. Spreadsheets, contracts. A yellow folder that said New Jersey on the cover, with Rocco's handwriting in the lower corner, small and cramped like everything he did. I opened it on the table. I started photographing every page with my phone, one by one, shaking more than I wanted to admit. The second page was a proof of transfer of $300,000 signed by Rocco on behalf of a company I'd already seen in my old folder. The third was a list of arms shipments, not wine, not flowers, not catering, destined for ports the Bella Vitas never operated. The fourth was worse than the third. It was all there, quiet inside a yellow folder, waiting for someone who knew what to look for. That's when I heard the voices. 2 on the other side of the wall. Men. Slow steps in the concrete hallway, a coat brushing the handle of the security door. Boss said to check. Back room. Which room? Archive. My chest beat once, hard. I closed the folder, shoved everything into the cabinet, hooked the broken padlock back on any old way. I put the phone in my coat's inner pocket, along with the note with the 10 digits I still hadn't thrown out, and stood in the middle of the room with nowhere to go. The handle of my door moved, except the door opened before they reached it. Maxim Volkov came in, shut the door behind him, and turned the key. My key, which he had taken from the lock without my noticing when. He put his hand lightly against my back, just long enough to guide me 2 steps back, and rested his other hand on the wood to block any noise coming from inside. The steps stopped outside. Locked. The boss said to open it. I don't have the key. Go get it. One of the 2 walked off. The other stayed. I heard the weight of his shoulder lean lightly against the door, testing the resistance, like someone weighing a thing before deciding whether it's worth the force. Maxim didn't move. He was pressed against the door, pressed against me, his dark coat with the same cold rain smell from Monday night's parking lot. A smell I shouldn't have recognized by now, but recognized as if it were yesterday, as if I'd been waiting for him. I stood still, not because I was afraid of him, because I was afraid of what I'd do if he took his hand off the wall. The steps outside finally moved off. Complete silence. Only the low hum of the ceiling bulb. He took a little longer to move his hand from the wood, as if he needed to be sure the danger had really gone. How did you get in here? I whispered. I came up the service stairs. How did you know I was coming? I didn't. I knew Rocco sent 2 men here today. I deduced it. You followed me. Yes. He said it without any ornament, like someone confirming the time on a clock. I stepped back half a pace, and he let me. The distance between us became the size of an arm, enough for me to breathe, and not enough for anything to make sense. You can't do this. I already did. Maxim. It was the first time I'd said his name out loud. He registered it. I saw something pass through his eyes that I couldn't name, but that stayed. The silence settled between us, dense and warm, and I realized the ceiling bulb hummed louder than my own breathing. I crossed my arms out of a defensive instinct and uncrossed them right after, because the gesture felt too childish for the room I was in, and for the woman I was trying to be. "I shouldn't want you," I said. The sentence came out without my deciding it. It came from the place where things stay kept before they become a choice, the place I had learned to ignore since Monaco. He took half a second to answer, his gaze fixed on mine without wavering. I tried to forget, too. His voice came low, controlled, but with a crack I hadn't heard before in that tone. 3 years. Monaco. 3 seconds. I counted. My chest rose and didn't come down right. He took half a step forward, and instead of retreating, I looked up. His face was close enough for me to see the line of his jaw, the faint tension in the muscles of his neck, and the small nick near his chin. From shaving, probably, in the morning, in a hurry. A human detail on a man I had learned to imagine as a statue. His hand rose slowly. It stopped a centimeter from my face, without touching, without pressing, asking, without using the word. I closed the distance. The kiss was short. Short on purpose. Short by measure. Short because I knew that if it lasted any longer, I wouldn't be able to leave that room as the woman who had walked into it. His mouth was softer than I expected, and firmer than I wanted to admit. His hand touched my chin for a second, without squeezing, with a care that didn't match the rest of him. The smell of rain, the taste of cold coffee, the hum of the bulb, constant and indifferent to everything happening in there. I pulled away first. He let me. He stood there, his hand still raised in the air where my face had been, and didn't try to bring me back. He lowered his hand slowly, his fingers folding calmly, like someone putting something away carefully. "I need the originals," I said, because it was the only thing I could hold on to in that room without losing my balance. "I've already photographed the essentials. I need the originals for Saturday." Saturday. The engagement party. I'm going to burn it all in public. He looked at me for 3 exact seconds. The same 3. And for the first time since Monaco, the man I had learned to call an enemy smiled. Faintly, almost nothing. A corner of the mouth that rose half a millimeter and didn't need to go any further. "Let me help. You can't show up at my party." "I won't show up. I'll prepare the ground. Rocco has an accountant who signs off on the diversions. If you have that accountant on your side, along with the video, the spreadsheets, and my written statement, he won't walk out of that hall free." "You'd testify against Rocco?" "I've testified against people for less." We spent the next 2 hours working side by side in that small, dimly lit room, our elbows nearly touching over the scratched table, our voices low, and our focus divided between the papers and the awareness that neither of us mentioned what had happened 3 minutes earlier. He opened the cabinet again, with an ease I preferred not to ask where it came from. We sorted folders. What I'd take with me hidden inside the fabric sample bag, what would stay as bait in its place. He wrote names on the back of a business card he took from his own coat pocket. Yuri, he said at some point, would bring Rocco's accountant into the circle by Thursday. Bianca would know the accountant through her father's friendship in the legal world. It was all already drawn out in his head, clean and precise as an architectural blueprint. "When did you plan all this?" I asked. "Since Monday's dinner." "And before the dinner?" He took his time. "Since the mark on your wrist." I looked at my hand without thinking. The imprint of Rocco's finger had already vanished 2 days earlier. He wasn't looking at the wrist now. He was looking at his own reflection in the matte steel of the cabinet, as if he'd just said out loud something he intended to keep to himself. I didn't answer. There was no answer that wasn't too much or too little. I put the folder into the sample bag. I opened the door carefully, peered into the hallway. Empty and quiet, with the smell of the fresh paint the decoration crew had used on the far wall. "You leave by the service stairs," I said, I'll leave through the main hall, as if I'm coming back from a meeting. Agreed. He passed me at the door. He stopped for half a second with his shoulder near mine, without touching, just the closeness, just the residual warmth of the coat, and continued. Saturday, Miss Bellavita. Saturday, Mr. Volkov. He disappeared down the stairs without a sound. I closed the archive room door, locked it with my key, and went down in the main elevator with the bag full of paper weighing far more than it should. I passed through the hall. I greeted the decorator. I remarked on the wrong color of a flower that was slightly pink where it should have been white. I smiled at 2 suppliers. No one noticed anything. In the car, I took the phone out of my pocket and pressed Bianca's name. She answered on the first ring. Chi. Bye. Are you alive? Saturday. My voice came out firm, and I surprised myself with the firmness. I'm going to burn it all in public. Silence on the other end. Good silence, the kind she did when she was processing something too big to comment on right away. What time do I get there? She said. Early. Bring whatever you can. Always. I hung up. I rested my head against the car window. The city passed outside in strips of orange light, the slow Wednesday traffic that New York never solved, and for a second I remembered his hand stopped a centimeter from my face, asking without using the word. I took the note from the bottom of the inner pocket. The 10 digits were still there, the ink slightly crumpled at the folds of the paper. I didn't dial the number. Not yet. But I folded the paper carefully this time and put it in the compartment of my wallet, where I kept the things I didn't throw out. Chapter 5. The Princess Doesn't Wait to be Saved. Saturday started too early. I woke before the alarm went off, the ceiling of my room still dark and the dossier assembled beside the bed like a second pillow. I ran my hand over the leather cover without opening it. I knew every page by heart, every number. Every signature of Rocco Ferretti scrawled as if no one would ever read it. No one had read it. Until me. I got up, took a long shower, let the hot water hit the back of my neck until it hurt. The steam rose thick and got trapped against the stone ceiling of the bathroom, and I stood there, still, letting the heat deafen me for a few minutes. When I shut off the water, the silence of the apartment was so thick I could hear the building's elevator rise 3 floors below. I dried my hair, chose the dress. Burgundy, long, sleeves to the elbow, fabric heavy as a promise made out loud. Bellavita color. If I was going to burn it all in public, I was going to burn it dressed in the symbol of the family I was trying to save from itself. Bianca arrived at 11 in the morning with 2 coffees and the face of someone who had slept 3 hours. Accountant confirmed, she said, dropping her keys on the counter with a metallic thud. He'll be at the party at 8. My dad gave his word to the man's mother that no one lays a finger on the guy. And if anyone does, my dad becomes an ally of your conscience, which is rare. Bianca, I'm nervous. Let me talk. I smiled half-heartedly. She opened the laptop on the table, checked the files, printed 2 extra copies, hid one of them inside the lining of a party bag. No one would search. The flash drive went into my cleavage, held by a thin, cold chain against my skin. Bianca looked, approved with a nod. If anyone goes to grope you there, honey, the problem is a lot bigger than the flash drive. Bianca. Okay, shutting up. We spent the afternoon going over the order. Quick greetings at the entrance. Ceremonial toast, dinner served, Salvatore's speech, Rocco's speech. Between his speech and dessert, I would take the microphone. Not before, not after. In that exact interval, both families would be seated. My father's ally, Senator, would be present, and Rocco would have no way to pretend the room wasn't public. And the Russian? Bianca asked, not looking at me, stirring the spoon in the already empty coffee. I raised my eyes. Maxim will be outside with Yuri. He doesn't come in until I finish. That was the deal. Do you believe he'll respect it? He'll respect it until the moment Rocco touches me. After that, it's his problem. She laughed, dry. Cute. Love between a mob woman and a Russian wolf is measured by attempts. We left at 7. The car cut through Manhattan with the gray autumn wind hitting the window and making the reflections of the street signs tremble on the glass. Chelsea was lit up like Christmas. The event venue that was mine, inherited from my mother, occupied by people who didn't belong to me. I got out of the car holding the hem of the burgundy dress, as if I were holding the leash of a large animal. Rocco waited for me at the top of the entrance stairs, an owner's smile wide open for the internal photographers. He kissed my cheek with a delicacy that only existed in front of an audience. His hand fit at my waist in the exact spot where he had squeezed me once, and he knew it. "You're late," he whispered, his lips too close to my ear. "Are you impatient to become my wife?" "Impatient to toast," I answered. He laughed as if I'd made a joke. We went in together. Both families were already spread through the hall, Italians on one side, allied Italians on the other. My father in the middle, with Don Alberto Marchesi beside him, the consigliere in a navy suit, and the look of someone who has seen this happen before. Salvatore looked at me for 3 seconds before opening a ceremonial smile. He kissed my forehead. He smelled of Piedmont wine and old cologne. "You look beautiful, daughter," he said. "Thank you, Papa." I held back the bitter laugh. He didn't know I looked beautiful in farewell. The ally senator, Mark Whitfield, shook my hand with the typical enthusiasm of someone collecting favors over dinner. I greeted 10 more faces, smiled at a woman who had watched me grow up, accepted the first toast of Burgundy wine. Yes, Piedmont. Mandatory. The glass weighed in my hand as if the glass itself knew the weight of what I carried inside the chain between my breasts. Bianca moved through the hall with the ease of someone born knowing that parties were battlefields. I located Emilio with my eyes, across the hall, a glass of water in his hand as we'd agreed. He saw me and lowered his chin 2 millimeters. The agreed signal. My father tapped the spoon against his glass. The hall fell silent. "Friends, brothers, allies," Salvatore began, with that low voice that made all of New York fall silent. "Tonight is not just an engagement. It is the union of 2 names that—" I stopped listening. I counted my breath. I looked at the door of the hall. On the other side of the dark glass, a tall silhouette in a black suit with no tie stood motionless, hands loose along his body. Maxime didn't look inside. He didn't need to. He knew I was looking at him. Salvatore finished the speech to discreet applause. He passed the microphone to Rocco. Rocco began talking about tradition and future. He talked about honor. He said my name 3 times with the wrong inflection, as if my name were a property he was cataloging. With each sentence, the grip on the burgundy dress strap at my wrist grew firmer, slower. My heart beat at a rhythm that wasn't fear. It was decision. When he raised his glass for the final toast, I took a step forward. "Excuse me, Rocco. Before dessert, I'd like to say a few words." The hall found it strange. Salvatore frowned. Rocco laughed, charming for the audience. "My bride, ladies and gentlemen, still surprises me." "I'm going to surprise you more," I answered quietly, only for him. I took the microphone from his hand before he could pull back. The entire hall stopped. 60 faces turned toward me. From the back, Bianca opened the laptop on a side table and connected the cable to the projection television I'd had installed that morning, on the excuse of an institutional video. "My father taught me one thing since I was a child," I began, looking at Salvatore. "That the Bella Vita name is untouchable. That we protect the name above all else. I believe that my whole life. And it's precisely because I believe it that I'm standing here today." Salvatore raised his hand slowly, trying to understand. "Chiara, let me finish, Papa." The screen lit up. The first spreadsheet appeared in projection. Large numbers, offshores in Singapore, monthly transfers leaving the Bella Vita accounts and not coming back. The hum of the ceiling air conditioning seemed to grow louder as the murmur ran through the hall. Over the last 2 years, The man you came here to see me marry stole from my father the equivalent of $16 million. It's all here. Bank names, dates, transfer codes. Second page, please. Bianca changed the projection. Signed contracts. Rocco's signature in every corner. New Jersey. A shipment of arms registered under the Volkov name, bought with our money, diverted by him. The plan was simple. Blame the Russians for a disappearance he himself organized, provoke a war between the two families, and take over my father's roots while you killed each other. Rocco laughed. The laugh came out false, high-pitched, wrong in size for the silence of the hall. This is a tasteless joke, Salvatore. Your daughter has been watching too many movies. Third page, I asked, without looking at him. Bianca changed it. A photo of the accountant, with the name below. He took 2 steps forward, stepped out from among the guests, and became visible. This is Mr. Emilio Rossi, my fiancé's personal accountant for 2 years. He came here today of his own free will, and will testify tomorrow in the custody of the Santoro family. Emilio, is it the truth? The accountant swallowed, looked at my father, and nodded. It's the truth, Mr. Bellavita. I have the originals. Salvatore went white. It wasn't rage yet. It was the face of someone who took a bullet and didn't fall, because he's still processing what happened. Rocco set the glass down on the table. The wine splashed onto my burgundy dress, stain on top of stain, dark on top of dark. He advanced 2 steps in my direction with a smile that was no longer charming. You spoiled bitch. Rocco, back off. You don't know what you've done. You don't know. He took 1 more step. I saw his arm rise inside his jacket, saw the black metal in his hand before he himself had decided to use it, and in that exact second the door of the hall opened with force, and a body came in facing me. Maxime. He stepped in front. The shot went off. Someone screamed. I saw Maxime spin half a step, with the impact in his left shoulder, without falling, without making a sound. Rocco dropped to his knees from the force of his own recoil. The gun slid across the marble and stopped 2 meters from me. I looked at the gun. I looked at Rocco on his knees, 1 hand braced on the marble, and the other reaching for the metal. I looked at my father, motionless on the other side of the hall, his fingers spread on the table as if he were trying to remember how to move. I didn't wait. I bent down, picked up the gun. The metal still held the warmth of his palm, heavy in the way I had learned in Long Island at 13, in a back courtyard where my father told me a Bella Vita girl couldn't shoot poorly. Both hands steadied on their own, muscle memory taking the place of thought. The barrel came level with Rocco's chest before I realized it was me doing the aiming. Back off. He laughed. He gave 1 more centimeter forward. You don't shoot anyone, princess. Back off. My wrist trembled. My voice didn't. I looked straight into his eyes and saw him in panic for the first time in 4 years of engagement. It was a strange thing to watch, the panic on a face I had only known in a pose. My father taught me to protect the last name, I said, for the whole hall to hear, for my father to hear. No one taught me to protect myself. I learned that today. Rocco backed off. 1 step, 2. His back hit the wall. 2 Italian captains, my father's men since before I was born, approached slowly, without asking for the gun. They took Rocco by the arms. One of them looked at Salvatore, waiting for an order. My father looked at me, then at Rocco, then at the olive signet ring on his own left hand. Take him, he said, in the dry voice of someone who decrees and doesn't explain. He is no longer an Italian alliance. Rocco started shouting things I didn't hear. Someone covered his mouth with a hand. He was dragged out the side door, the expensive shoe striking the marble until the sound vanished into the hallway. I lowered the gun. Yuri appeared at Maxim's side, calm as if he were remarking on the weather, and pressed the sleeve of his jacket against the shoulder. Bullet. Went straight through. Annoying. Maxime nodded once. He looked at me. The left shoulder of the black suit wet with red, his hair disheveled for the first time since I'd known him. He didn't say anything. He just waited. My father walked over to me slowly, with the heavy stride of a man who never ran, because he never had to. He looked at the stained dress, at the gun I still hadn't let go of, at the Russian bleeding 3 meters behind him. He held out his hand. I thought it was for the gun. I handed it over. "You humiliated me at my own party," he said quietly. "I saved you from your own party," I answered. He closed his eyes for a second, as if weighing every word of the sentence before filing it away. He didn't hug me. He didn't hit me. He just stepped back 2 paces, looked at Maxim once, a long once, and spoke without looking at anyone in particular. "No one touches him tonight. Tomorrow we talk." It wasn't a blessing. It wasn't war. It was the most my father could give me that night. And I knew it better than he did. I picked up my bag, the extra copy of the dossier inside the lining, the flash drive still between my breasts weighing like stone. Bianca held my arm once, squeezed, let go. The whole gesture lasted less than 2 seconds and said everything that needed to be said. I crossed the entire hall, under all the eyes that had come to see me marry, and stopped beside Maxim. "Let's go." He held out his good hand. I took it. We went down the steps of the event venue's entrance together, and his car was parked exactly where he'd left it, the engine running and the cold autumn night air hitting against the leather of the seat. Yuri opened the back door without a word. I got in first. Maxim got in after, his shoulders stiff, the jacket marking the leather with a dark stain he ignored as if it weren't his. Only when the engine caught and the car started pulling away from Chelsea did I finally breathe deep for the first time in 3 hours. My chest rose, fell, rose again, trembling slightly in the last second as if the body were confirming it was still alive. The street lights passed fast by the window, and I saw none of them. And he, without looking at me, held out his good hand to the side, resting on the leather, open. He didn't pull. He didn't ask. He just left it there. I put mine on top of his. He closed his fingers. The car went forward, toward the airport. He had said quietly that Chicago was further from my father's reach. And for now, that was what I needed. Chapter 6. The Silence Before the Coffee. Manhattan passed by the window as if it were happening in another city. I watched the lights go by on the glass and couldn't identify the streets. I knew every corner of that route by heart. I'd grown up on that island. But that early morning, the signs seemed written in a language I'd forgotten to study. Maxim's hand stayed closed over mine, warm, with a slight tremor in the thumb I'd never seen before. That tremor disturbed me more than the bullet. "Does it hurt?" I asked quietly. "It's nothing." "It's a bullet in the shoulder, Maxim." He nearly smiled. "A corner of the mouth only. It's under control." Yuri from the front seat murmured without turning his head. "Doctor, waiting, house." I laughed. It was a short laugh, almost broken, that came out before I authorized it. Maxim looked at me sideways as if that sound were the only thing that mattered in that car. He squeezed my fingers once, and I felt the pressure of his knuckles against my palm, firm enough to anchor me. His building rose on a corner of old brick with a clean facade. No name, no visible doorman. The car went into the underground garage, where the concrete smelled of oil and cold damp, and Yuri stopped by the private elevator. We got out. The doctor waited in the hall with a black case, and the discretion of someone who had been to that address other times. He treated Maxim right there, seated in a dark leather armchair, while I stood leaning against the wall, still in the burgundy dress with the wine stain and the blood stain, not knowing what to do with my hands. The hall light was yellow, low, and made the shadows fall strangely on Maxim's face as he lay motionless, eyes on the ceiling, letting the doctor work. When the doctor left, the silence filled the entire apartment. Maxim got up slowly, his shoulder bandaged beneath the white shirt Yuri had brought from the bedroom. He walked over to me, stopped 1 step away. His gray eyes swept my face up and down, reading everything I had no words to say. "Do you want to talk?" he asked. I shook my head. He nodded, without pressing, and guided me through the room to the wide sofa in front of the window. The city glowed behind the glass as if nothing had happened. As if in some hall in Chelsea an entire family hadn't collapsed around a single woman with a flash drive in her cleavage. That was where I broke. It wasn't a loud cry. It was a cry of 25 years held back, that came down in silence and wouldn't stop. I cried for my mother, who died before teaching me to say no. I cried for my father, who spent his life calling me princess without realizing he was building me a collar. I cried for the girl who at 13 learned to shoot in a back courtyard because a Bella Vita couldn't shoot poorly. I cried for the woman who spent her whole engagement asking permission to breathe. The tears came down hot, and I wiped away none of them. Maxime didn't hug me. He didn't tell me it was all going to be fine. He didn't fix me. He just stayed. He sat beside me with his good hand open on his own knee, without touching me, without forcing me, without filling my silence with his. His breathing was regular, constant, and at some point I began to use that rhythm to calibrate my own. When I'd calmed enough to breathe right, he got up, went to the kitchen, came back with a glass of ice water. I drank. I felt the cold go down to my stomach and settle there, heavy and real. He took the glass back and set it on the little table without making a sound. "Do you want to see the balcony?" he asked. I nodded. He opened the glass door. The early morning wind came in cold, smelling of river and wet asphalt, as if it had rained at some point in the night without my noticing. I stood near the railing, watching the Hudson run black down below. The New Jersey lights on the other side flickered on the surface of the water like candles. He stopped beside me, his bandaged shoulder a hand's width from mine, his hands resting on the cold metal railing. "I counted 3 seconds in Monaco," he said. "I spent 3 years trying to forget. I couldn't. And today, when you picked up that gun without waiting for anyone, I understood I was never going to forget." I turned to look at him. "I don't know if I know how to do this," I said. "To stay, to choose, without asking permission." "I don't know if I do either," he answered. "I spent my life thinking that protecting someone meant controlling them. I woke up today thinking I was going to watch over you one more night. If you let me, I'll try to learn the difference. If you let me. If you let me." That was where he asked the question I'd been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. "Do you want to stay?" I looked at the river. I looked at his bandaged shoulder. I looked at my own reflection in the glass of the French door. A woman in a stained burgundy dress, hair undone, red eyes, a version of me my mother had never known and might have liked to know. A version that had picked up a gun and didn't tremble. "Yes." He rested his forehead against mine. The wind kept blowing between us, but I no longer felt cold. It was a slow kiss, single, unhurried, with no audience. His good hand rose slowly to my face, his fingers spread on my cheek as if he were afraid of squeezing too hard and breaking me. I didn't break. I had already broken hours earlier, on the sofa, and what he was touching now was something else, something that didn't have a name yet, but that was whole. He pulled away. He asked with his eyes. I nodded. He took me by the hand down the short hallway to the bedroom. The door closed behind us. I woke with sun on my face. The Sunday light came in through a tall window with no curtain, white and direct like someone who doesn't apologize for existing. It took me a few seconds to understand where I was. The bed was wide, the sheets white and heavy. The pillow on the left side smelled of him. Dark wood, something citrus, the memory of a night still settling inside me. He was no longer there. I reached for the white shirt folded over the chair, the same one he'd worn after the dressing, now clean, changed at some point I didn't hear, and put it on. I buttoned the 3 middle buttons, left the others down, and went barefoot to the kitchen. He stood by the light marble counter, dark gray sweatpants, the bandage on his shoulder still showing beneath the black t-shirt. A cup of coffee in his hand, another empty one waiting beside it, as if he knew exactly when I'd wake up. He saw me come in. He didn't smile. He just looked. The way he looked, whole, unhurried, like someone who needs nothing beyond what he's seeing. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." I filled the second cup. The coffee was hot, dark, unsweetened, just right. I sat on the tall stool by the counter, rested my elbows on the cold marble, stared at the liquid for a moment before taking the first sip. "Has Yuri come by yet?" I asked. "Not yet. He'll get here at 10. I nodded. I took another sip. "Kiara." I raised my eyes. He set the cup down with a soft sound on the marble. He took a step, leaned his hip against the counter right in front of me, crossed his arms carefully because of the shoulder, and spoke quietly, without drama. The way he said the things that mattered, as if he were reading a contract that would never disappear. I spent my life thinking that loving someone meant keeping that person close enough that no one could reach them. I woke up today knowing it was just fear with a pretty name. You're not mine for me to protect. You're mine because you chose. If one day you stop choosing, I won't hold you. My eyes filled again. I didn't let it fall. "I'll try to learn the difference," he finished, "between control and protection. If I get it wrong, you tell me, and I'll back off." I stayed silent for a moment, the warmth of the cup in my fingers and those words settling into me layer by layer. I reached out across the counter, took his hand. I squeezed once. I didn't need to say anything else in that minute. I got up from the stool, went around, and rested my forehead on his shoulder. The good one, the right one, the one that still worked. He closed his arm around my waist slowly, without rush, without hunger. Just the weight of his arm there, firm, saying what neither of us needed to translate anymore. We stayed like that for a time I didn't measure. His phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced sideways, without letting go of me. "Yuri." He read the message, then read it again, then handed me the device without comment. It was a short message, written in Salvatore Bellavita's dry Portuguese. "Take care of her. S." Just that. No, my son-in-law. No, with my blessing. No, everything's fine. 3 words and an initial, from the man who taught me that a last name weighed more than a heartbeat, that family was duty before it was affection. It wasn't a blessing. It wasn't war. It was my father giving me the only bit of permission he could give that morning. And the rest would take him a while. I already knew that from the night before, when I handed him the gun and he didn't hug me. He didn't hug me, but he also didn't look away. I gave the phone back to Maxim. He read it again, silent, and set the device back on the marble with the same care as always. "I'll answer later," he said. "Answer tomorrow," I said. "Today is mine." He nearly smiled again, that corner of the mouth, the same one from the car, that I was already learning to decipher. I went back to the tall stool. He filled my coffee without asking whether I wanted more, and we stayed there a while drinking in comfortable silence. The sun rising slowly in the apartment's tall window, warming the marble in the shoulders and the air between us. At some point, between one sip and another, a thought crossed my mind, light, almost from the outside. No one had told me where the Italian captains took Rocco Ferretti the night before. No one had asked. No one had given me an account. I blinked. I pushed the idea somewhere that wasn't that kitchen. I smiled back at the man pouring my coffee. Sunday had barely begun, and for the first time in 25 years, I didn't need to ask anyone's permission to let it begin.